Hi, everybody. My name is Lydia Nipper, and I'm a nutrition and health specialist with University of Missouri Extension. I serve Franklin and Gasconade counties in the East Central region of Missouri. Today, the recipe I'll be sharing with you is one of my family's favorites. It's called Blackened Tuna Patties, and everybody loves it, including my 4-year-old, so it's one that I use often. So we'll start by reviewing the ingredients. We're going to talk about some substitutions that you can make today if you don't have all the ingredients, as well as cooking them together to see what they look like. So before I begin any recipe, it's always wise to make sure that you have all the ingredients that you need or their substitutions. Have them pre-measured to make sure you have enough of them. And then, of course, wash your hands, fronts, backs, and betweens, under nails for at least 20 seconds. And then also make sure you have a clean workspace. Always put away any extra dishes or food packages that you might not need. This can help reduce contamination within your kitchen. So let's start by reviewing the ingredients that you'll need today. The first thing that you'll need is a 5-ounce can of tuna, just a regular standard tuna can packed in water. Got my notes here. 1/4 cup of diced or chopped onion, 1/3 cup of mixed vegetables or regular vegetables. It doesn't matter as long as they're shredded. You can use fresh, frozen. This year happens to be a frozen blend, but shredded zucchini or carrots or celery also work excellent for this recipe. Next, I have 2 tablespoons of light salad dressing, just kind of here in a cup, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 egg that's been beaten, and 1/3 cup of plain breadcrumbs, measured out here. So I already pre-measured everything. I know that I have everything I need for my recipe. And I'll also be using some nonstick cook spray. And my tools will include a skillet, a spatula, and also just a regular bowl and spatula. So let's go ahead and start by mixing together our ingredients. First thing we're going to mix is our tuna. So we're going to go ahead and put that in on there and scrape it in so that we have it all. Our onion, our vegetables, dressing and garlic powder. Dressing and garlic powder, those are going to go in as well. And then our beaten egg last. So once you get all those in, you want to go ahead and mix them around, making sure to scrape the sides regularly so that everything gets mixed in evenly. You want to avoid pockets of just tuna or just salad dressing, because if those pockets stay in there whenever it cooks, you might bite into a pocket of unflavored tuna or just seasoning, which could be kind of robust. So at this point, your mixture should be a little bit thin, a little bit runny, because we haven't added the breadcrumbs yet, which come next. Go ahead and pour in your breadcrumbs and mix thoroughly. So you should notice that your mixture is actually thickening up because the breadcrumbs are absorbing some of that extra egg and salad dressing that's in there. And it should be a pretty firm mixture. Once you think you have it added evenly, go ahead and scrape down the side so you have all your tuna mixture there. And we're actually going to let this set over to the side for about 5 minutes. In that 5-minute time frame, what's going to happen is it's going to set, and some of those excess liquids are going to continue to absorb into the tuna and breadcrumbs that we've put in. So that way, whenever it's time to go into the skillet, it'll be ready to go. So I actually have a second batch that's been resting for 5 minutes. I'm going to grab that out here. And after 5 minutes, it should look a little bit firmer than it did before. This is my 5-minute batch. A little bit firmer and ready to go. So let's go ahead and get our cooktop ready. We're going to turn our burner on to a medium heat and set our skillet on that burner because it's going to heat up as well. While it's heating up, I'm just going to kind of set some dishes to the side so that I can continue to keep my workspace clean. And we'll also talk about the nutrition content of this recipe, as well as some substitutions you can make if you don't have everything on hand. So, and as we go through these, you'll notice I actually made a couple substitutions myself. So let's work on those preformed patties now that we have our, after it's rested for 5 minutes. I am not very good at eyeballing in terms of just looking something and knowing exactly how it splits into 4 or in 2, depending upon how I'm dividing my measurements. So what I like to do is to get it together all in a nice little even ball and cut it into 4, because this recipe makes 4 servings. And it's important to stick as closely to 4 servings as you can for a couple of reasons. If you're feeding more than just yourself, you want to make sure you have enough to go around and everyone gets equal amounts. But it's also important as you're watching calorie intake, that if a recipe makes 4 servings, that you're only calculating you've eaten 1/4 of it, and that's how many calories you've actually taken in. So go ahead and break it up into 4, like so. And then we'll take that 4th and work it into a patty. So as we're working it into a patty, our goal is to get it 3 inches in diameter. Diameter means that at the widest portions of the patty, it's only 3 inches. And then only about 1/3 of an inch thick. You want to try and get it as evenly across as you can so that you don't have any pockets that are overcooked or undercooked. Just nice little patty like that. And you can actually see throughout the patty the carrots, there's some onion and some green onion in there, as well as some white cabbage and onion. So you can actually see those vegetables in there, which is excellent. And then go ahead and grab and make a second patty. A specific skillet is not required for this. I'm only going to cook 2 at a time, so I have about a 9 to 10 inch skillet. But of course, the bigger the skillet, the more you can cook at a time. You do want to make sure that your patties have enough space in between them, that they're not touching, so that they can still cook evenly. Otherwise, they might take longer to cook and might not be cooked completely right. Okay, so we have 2 patties here, and I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands off, of course, before touching anything else. Making sure to still wash backs of the hands, fronts of the hands, and under the nails. Warm water. Okay, so our skillet has heated up, and we are going to give it a quick little spray with our cooking spray. Nice thin coat, not too much, and set it back down on top there. And our patties are ready to go in. So we're just gonna set them in, plenty of space apart from one another, giving them some time to cook. And my skillet was warm enough that I can actually already hear them cooking. Okay, so let's talk about some substitutions that we can make with this recipe if you don't have everything on hand. You're gonna notice I've already made some substitutions, and that's okay. So the first thing our recipe calls for is tuna packed in water, a 5-ounce can. You do want to make sure you have 5 ounces. If not, you'll need to adjust the other ingredients more or less dependent upon, so your ratio stays the same. Tuna in water is one of the most popular ways you'll find it packed. You can also find it packed seasoned. You can find it in a package instead of a can. You can also find it packed in oil. It's really important to pay attention to those, because whenever things are packed with additional spices or oils, that can also add some calories. But regardless of how you get it packed, you always want to make sure that before you add the tuna in, you drain it really well. So you have an adult help you get the top off, press it down to get that excess liquid out, pour that out, and then put the tuna in. If you have too much extra liquid, then it could make your patties fall apart and not stick together the way you want them to. After our tuna, we added in some onion, and of course you can use fresh onion. That's an excellent. You can use white onion, yellow onion. Even if you have red onion on hand, you could use that. I happen to have chopped onion from a freezer section already in my freezer. I keep this on hand because I'm very sensitive to chopping onions, and this way I can just scoop and go, and I don't have to cry whenever I'm using onions, but either fresh or frozen works great with that. Same thing for vegetables. I used a pre-shredded vegetable I already had in my freezer. Carrots, celery, zucchini, fresh, all work excellent for this recipe. What you want to be mindful of is that if you're using any frozen or canned alternatives in any recipe, that you pay attention to the nutrition label on the back, as calories could be added in those. Sometimes sugar, oil, or even salt get added and can affect that nutritional value. So just something to keep in mind. After my vegetables, I called for 2 tablespoons of light salad dressing. I had this one on hand. It was already open. I didn't want to waste it. So this is not a light salad dressing. It's just the basic ranch. You can use Italian, French, honey mustard. Any of those flavors will work good in this recipe. But if you can find a light one or a reduced fat one, that is a better option, as it also takes some of those bad calories out of what you're consuming as well. Garlic powder, very basic. Not to be confused with garlic salt. Garlic salt is different, as it has salt added in it and can make your recipe more salty than you meant for it to. If you notice, this recipe, we actually don't add salt, and I think you'll find that it tastes plenty flavorful without it. So by using garlic salt instead of garlic powder, that could make it a little overpowering. So our tuna patties are going to cook for 2 to 3 minutes on each side. And you never want to go below the recommended time, but you could always go a little bit more if you like yours more blackened. I like mine more blackened than my daughter does. She prefers her closer to 2 minutes. I like mine at 3 or even a little bit more. So I will actually cook these to show you a variation of both of them, but I'm going to go ahead and flip them so that you can kind of see what those variations are. Okay, so we talked about salad dressing and garlic powder. Another substitution, this recipe calls for plain breadcrumbs. I did not have plain. I had Italian in the cabinet, and I used what I had to be more efficient. But perhaps you have everything but breadcrumbs, or you can't find them at the store. We know that by baking 1.5 slices of bread on a cookie sheet at 300 degrees until it's toasty and crumbly equals about 1/3 of a cup of breadcrumbs. So that's a great alternative just to kind of file away for you to use in the future. So I used Italian, and of course I would still have to be mindful that that could change the nutrition content of that. And then of course the standard egg was beaten, no real variation there. If you don't have cooking spray, no big deal. You can use a little bit of cooking oil or olive oil on a paper towel and just wipe it around the pan. It gives it the same effect. Of course, nutrition can be affected too, so keep that in mind. Okay, so those are browning up nicely. You always want to make sure that as you're cooking, you have the plate or dish that you're going to put it on ready to go. All right, and then here in a moment, we will talk about what the nutrition value of this recipe is and review those together and different ways that you can enjoy this recipe with your family. So these are done, and you will notice I have a little bit of a variation in color. I've kept one on just a little bit longer because I like it a little bit darker. Here we have about a 3 to 4 minute, and here we have about a 2 to 3 minute. You'll notice one's a little bit lighter, one's darker. What's important is if you have access to a meat thermometer, to make sure that in the center, in the thickest part, that it reaches at least 145 degrees to indicate that it's been cooked thoroughly through. And then you'll know you're done. So let's talk about the nutritional value of this recipe. I mentioned earlier that this makes 4 servings. So keep in mind, if you eat more than 1 patty, let's say you eat 2 of them, you will need to double, do some quick math and double everything that we're going to talk about. But 1 patty contains 120 calories, 3.5%, or excuse me, 3.5 grams of fat, which is about 5%. It has 360 milligrams of sodium, so 15%. So as you're making those adjustments with things you have on hand, keep that in mind so that you don't intake too much sodium, especially if you're watching that closely. And it has 10 grams of carbohydrate, which is about 3% of a daily recommended value. And it's also high in iron as it has 1 milligram, so about 6% of daily recommended value. So a really great, easy, accessible, quick recipe to have here. And there's a couple different ways you can eat this. My family really loves to eat them on a plate, kind of crab cake style. We have some salad greens and a vegetable, and it goes over great. You can also throw them on a bun with some cheese for a sandwich, some lettuce, tomato, and onion. They make an excellent sandwich. And if you're trying to get someone new to try it that's maybe a little wary, of course, they go excellent with dipping sauces. Just be very mindful of measurements and serving sizes of those dipping sauces, as you don't want to take in too much more sugar or extra calories that you hadn't planned on. So these have been Blackened Tuna Patties, and this is from our seasonal and simple recipe. And I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.